Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I know I've been a bit absent and I'm sorry about that, but I'm back now. I'm hopefully gonna be back on track with you too. I'll tell you more about that on another video. Today I have something more exciting for you. It's that etchrlab has sent me some art supplies to review with you guys, and I'm really excited to try them out because they're awesome. Another thing that's going to be on another video, because I don't want this to be too long, is that they have given me access to 3 of their mini workshops. They now have a platform that has courses. A lot of them are about watercolors and stuff, so if you're interested in that, make sure you check that out. But I will have a video that's hopefully going to be up next about etchrlab's workshops and trying out the ones that they have given me. But let's get into the review now. So I've made a little list with all of my observations. This actually has been a while back. I'm recording the voiceover like after a month of me actually trying this. I decided to use these sketchbooks and these watercolors for my Inktober. And now we're on the middle of November. I've done 4 paintings in these sketchbooks during the Inktober month. Okay, so I'm gonna start with some general pros and cons while you start seeing the unboxing of this video, and you probably already see it. Isn't everything packed beautifully? Honestly, one of the first things was that I had such a nice experience getting everything out of the boxes and pulling out everything. It felt like opening a gift. I don't know, but I don't remember having such a nice experience opening anything else. There was something about unpacking this package that felt really nice. Just because of that, I'm giving them a plus. Also, another thing that I really loved is that it was written everywhere that it was vegan friendly and recycled paper, and the sketchbooks are also vegan friendly. You also have to protect the materials you're sending. I know because I have a shop, and when you send stuff you need to protect it, and obviously you just need to have that packaging. So it's also nice if you make it luxurious and give your buyer a nice experience when opening it. Now on to a little con. So I didn't really buy these things because, as I said, I've been gifted them by etchrlab. I'm gonna have honest opinions though. Like, I'm pretty happy with the results, but I'm gonna have honest opinions. And one of the things that I didn't like, generally speaking, and this might be personal, is the website. So I entered the website a few times. It doesn't seem very user-friendly, especially for a shop. It looks very aesthetic just for, checking out the products and reading about them, but it doesn't look as practical as a shop. Like, for example, there wasn't a page where you could see all together, which sometimes is practical. You have to click on every category. And for example, right now I was quickly checking out the sketchbooks for taking last notes, and I didn't find a way to buy a separate sketchbook. You always had to buy them in bulks of 3, which is good if you have the money because you save a bit. I don't know, maybe if you add them to your cart, you can do something, but like initially out of the bat, there wasn't that option. And that felt like very uncomfortable for me if I was going to buy them. So that's just an opinion. I just wanted to mention that because if I'm gonna talk pros and cons, that is part of the buying experience. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the watercolors now, and I want to tell you the real price of these so you can also value them with the correct price. So this watercolor set is $50, or what is 45 euros here in Europe. It's a 24 half pan set and is labeled as premium student grade, which right out of the bat sounds a bit odd because I haven't seen many materials labeled this. They're either student grade or premium professional grade. This is like sort of a middle point between them. So the label might sound a bit confusing, but to be completely honest, I was surprised with the quality of the pigments. They're super buttery and pigmented. When you use them, you can see the colors are just so nice and vibrant. You pull them down and the color just stays vibrant, not like other watercolors that they just fade. Also, a lot of the dark colors stay pretty dark. And for example, compared with other student quality brands that I've tried, and I've tried a few, these are probably the best. Not only this, but later I kept reading about the information of the pigments and such, and the light fastness of these watercolors is much better than others of a student grade too. The level of light fastness indicates if the colors fade quickly or more slowly over time. When they have high light fastness, means that the color stays like it is a long time. And these actually have that. I think most of the pigments have really high light fastness. What is the pro of having high light fastness in a student grade set? Well, if you're starting out, you don't have to spend that much money in a professional set, and you can still sell your paintings and ensure that they're gonna last a long time. Now, I don't understand that much about the pigment side. It's something that I want to learn more about and that I'm slowly trying to research as I go. But I was initially surprised when I opened the leaflet that comes with watercolors that you can swatch on and see that a lot of them had the pigment name and it was only one pigment. Now, I don't know much about this, but I know that when it's only one pigment, it usually means that it's better quality. And I actually went to read about this to inform you guys because I want to give you real information. 20 of the 24 colors on this set are a single pigment paint. This means that they use less pigments to make the paintings. In cheap paintings, what they do is mix more pigments, and especially they add very little quantity of high quality pigments to, make the pans cheaper and sort of make them the same quality, all of them. What this means is later when you're mixing, the colors muddy much faster because you're not mixing just one or two pigments, you're mixing a bunch of pigments that are included in a single color, and you don't know about that, obviously. So when you're now mixing colors with this set, you are actually only mixing 1, 2, 3 pigments, and that gives you a more reliable mix. You can know what to expect, especially if you know about pigments, obviously. And it's just much harder to get unexpected muddiness or maybe get a granulating mix without expecting it because you didn't know about the pigments. Why am I mentioning the pigments so much? Well, in student grade sets, I don't think you have single pigments as far as I know. And if you do, it's very, very rare. As I said, it's usually a diluted mix. I was really, really surprised about this. And I also read a couple of reviews talking about this and saying stuff like this that is really, really good for a student grade set. And that's why it's called premium student grade. Just for the light fastness and the pigments is already given his quality a boost, and they deserve the premium tag in front of the student grade. So with all of these, I will say that this will be a very good set, either for someone who wants to start with some quality, but not spend that much money. Yes, it's on the expensive side for a student grade, but it's not as expensive as a professional grade watercolor, and it will give you a bit of a better experience when learning. A lot of people say that if you learn with very, very cheap watercolors, you'll be missing some stuff because there's some techniques and some things that won't work as well. So this will give you that experience without spending the hundreds of dollars of a professional painting set. And I will also recommend this for someone that's on a middle point and wants to upgrade from student quality paints but doesn't really want to spend that much money. For example, Winston & Newton student grade is just so much worse than this. I've never liked it. A lot of people recommend it, but for example, for me, I've tested a few of student grades, and Van Gogh, for example, is much better. So if you're thinking about buying the bigger set of the student grade of Winston & Newton, I will much rather go to these ones. You'll have a much better painting experience, I promise you. The colors are much more pigmented, and all of this that I've just said about pigments and light fastness and all doesn't happen with Winston & Newton, despite it being such a well-known brand. And as far as I know, their professional grade paints are great, but their student grade not as much. Another thing I want to add, if you've ever tried Kuretake watercolors, I have a video about that because I have them and I love them to death because they're so rich and pigmented and awesome. These colors compare to them. They can honestly compete with the Kuretake watercolors. And as far as I know, I've heard reviews from people that work with much more professional watercolors than me. The Kuretake watercolors aren't professional grade either. Japanese watercolors are usually different from our watercolors around here, so it's not really graded like that. As far as the pigmentation goes, they're really, really similar, which makes me so happy. Also, I want to mention that I like the distribution of the colors. There's about 2 or 3 of each color, so there's a good distribution of them amongst the palette. And there's a lot more browns. I think there's 4 or 5 browns, 3 or 4 blues too, which means you have a bit of everything. You don't really lack in any color, and of course you can mix. But for someone starting out, sometimes they're looking for a variation like this so they don't have to mix as much. For example, I mentioned the browns is always always good to have a variety of browns because you use browns a lot when you start mixing. And there's a lot of variation in the browns. And if you only have 1 or 2 browns, and that has happened to me before in other sets, you really can't work as well around mixing some colors. It's just harder to mix if you don't have enough browns. And lastly, I really like the tin and the packaging. The tin itself, I like it because it has wells on one side and the other, which has enough space for mixing. Initially when I opened it, I wasn't too happy with the wells. I like the deeper wells, so I was a bit hesitant thinking that they might not be enough. They just have like 4 big wells on it. After using it, it was space enough because they're pretty big, so you can mix in one corner and, you know, just use the space pretty well. Okay, and now let's move on to the cons. All of those were pros. Obviously, some of these things might be a bit personal. I wanted to mention as a con, because it's a con for a lot of people, that there's black and white in these palettes. So honestly, there's only 22 colors, then black and white. To me, this isn't such a con, also because all student grade sets have black and white. So it's basically mandatory for them to add it. Then I do use black because a lot of times I want to paint something black and that's it. People that only use it for mixing or only do landscapes and such, a lot of times don't use black, they just mix it so they can have a richer tone. And white, I don't use too much. Curiously, with this set, I've used it a few times. It was actually using it pretty thickly as if it was whitewash to add some highlights, and that actually worked pretty well. And I think I will keep doing it because like that I can use the white and not have it there without being used. And a lot of times too, like people don't use white, if you don't know this, because you can actually mix water into your mix, and so white basically does nothing to the paint. A lot of times it even dulls the color. However, if you're aiming for a pastel tone, I like better to add white than to add water. So this is why I say that it's a con, but maybe not for everyone. So then another con is that they're more expensive than similar student grades, and I've already said this, but also they've earned a premium student grade label, which I think that means that you also earn the right to be a bit more expensive because you have higher quality than other student sets. Then a con that I've read online, and I didn't thought about that because I usually don't buy tubes or separate pans, but they don't sell these in either tubes or separate pans. You can't refill your palette, which is a bit of a con because it will be a really nice palette to refill and to switch colors if you wanted other colors, especially if you use a color a lot and then you end up using it all up. You can't replace it. Alright, and now we move on to the sketchbooks. And the sketchbooks actually was one of the things I was mostly excited about because for a while I've been looking for a nice watercolor sketchbook and nothing convinced me, mostly because a lot of them are pretty expensive, and when it's the first time you use them, you can't really know if you're gonna like them or not, and it seems like such a big investment. So let's start with the Perfect Sketchbook. This is a cold press sketchbook, which means the paper has grain, and the price of the Perfect Sketchbook is about $55, which will be around €50. The one I have is of A4 size, landscape format, and it has 44 pages, which to be honest is already a pro because I don't think I've seen watercolor sketchbooks with this many pages. And I think they also have this many pages because the grain is the same on both sides. Well, it's actually slightly thinner in the back, but the grain is really similar in both sides, so you can actually use both sides for the same quality of watercolor painting. As with before, and this applies to both sketchbooks, they're vegan friendly and they're 100% cotton paper. Another good thing about them is that they seem to put the grain direction in the same position always, so both of the sketchbooks always open really flat and really nicely. Both of the covers are pretty nice and resistant. I like especially the cover of the Perfect Sketchbook because, I don't know, I think it's for the texture, it's just like really nice to the touch, and I prefer this color. And after using it on both, the paper didn't buckle too much, despite me using a lot of water at certain points. The paper on the Perfect Sketchbook is actually 300 GSM, so yes, it resists a lot of water. The only con I could find, and this one is the one that I've used the most, it has already 3 paintings on it, is that it's only available as a cold press. So if you wanted to use a hot press paper, it's not available in this particular sketchbook, but you do have it available in other sketchbooks. And now I wanted to mention to about the perfect sketchbook is that I'm not a cold press kind of girl when I work with watercolors, and this is mainly because I work a lot with fine liners and then fill it up with paint. As you probably know, the grain, it is much harder in fine liners and brush pens. It usually destroys them much faster, but I also never really loved the excess of texture. I feel like I don't manage it as well. But in this sketchbook, I don't know if it was because the grain isn't as exaggerated as in other sketchbooks or what, but I really loved working with the grain in this paper. I actually liked it much more than working in the hot press sketchbook. Also, another thing that I should point out is that the color stayed very vibrant on the paper. And now I'll move on to the details to the hot press sketchbook, which is the white one. And this is not a perfect sketchbook. This is just called hot press sketchbook. The price of this is slightly cheaper, is $39. Is again an A4 size and landscape format. This one has 52 pages, so it has more pages than the previous one. And again, as I said, is hot press, which means it has no grain, but this one is actually available both with hot press and cold press paper. The paper in this sketchbook is slightly thinner, is 220 GSMs, and is acid free and 100 cotton, as I said with the other one too. The good thing about this one has a couple of perks related to being hot press, is that it's ideal for mixed media. It's much easier on the pencils, on the fine liners and everything. Also, another thing is that hot press paper is usually more erasable, and I'm saying this in quotes because there is techniques, if you know a bit about watercolors, to erase some of the pigment in watercolors, and with paper like this it's usually better. Also, I found that with this paper it seemed to erase pretty well. I don't know if it's something about the paper or about it being cotton, I can't be sure. I call it erase, but it's actually called lifting the color. Then another thing that is supposed to be a pro, I don't really think I will use it, but I thought I'll mention it. You've seen in the video, the cover is sort of white with texture and it's cotton and it's thought out to be painted on. To be completely honest, I don't think I will do this. It feels like, I don't know, it doesn't feel right to paint the cover for me. I don't think I'll do it, and I don't think I will love to paint on that texture either. Like, it doesn't seem too comfortable to paint on. Maybe it's because I'm not used to paint on canvases and stuff with those sort of textures, but it's a good pro if you like to personalize your sketchbook even more, and I do like it that it seems very resistant too. So even if I don't paint it, it still looks really nice. However, I like to stick stickers in my sketchbooks, and I don't think I will be able to do that. I've read, I don't remember for which of them or in both, that these sketchbooks actually rival Etchr Sketchbooks. I haven't tried Etchr Sketchbooks. I've tried Etchr paper once, and I didn't particularly love it, to be honest. Maybe it was because it was the first time I used it. It was a pretty expensive big sheet of paper. I've heard people that have tried both that say these sketchbooks rival them, and they're actually slightly cheaper. So if you're on the lookout for an Etchr sketchbook, maybe you want to try this one too and see if it's a good alternative for it. And in both of them, the cover seems very robust and the binding too. I think I read something about double binding. Basically, from what I read, it seems like a sketchbook that can endure travel and heavy duty use. And another thing in both of the sketchbooks is that watercolor paper is on all the sketchbook. And with this I mean that is also the paper that is glued to the cover is also watercolor paper. It's not like a normal sheet of paper like some sketchbooks do, so you can use the sketchbook from start to finish. And they also both have this little pocket at the end that you can use to put things in. I don't use that much, but if you're carrying a sketchbook on the go, it can be useful for carrying things there, like references. Then a general con for both of these sketchbooks is that they're on the expensive side. But is this really a con when we're talking about high quality sketchbooks? Not that much. I've seen Etchr sketchbooks with less pages being more expensive. Is it really that expensive? No. Would I probably have bought it on my own? No. Because it is a bit expensive for me at the moment. I don't think I would have spent 40 or 50 euros on a sketchbook at the moment because it feels like such a luxury. And to be completely honest, maybe after trying this, I will actually think about buying myself one, because even though it is on the expensive side, you can notice that the quality is really good. I really appreciate the value of it being vegan friendly, and I just really like the quality and the experience of working with them in general. One last thing I wanted to point out, and it's not a particular problem for me because I actually wanted this size of sketchbooks and I usually only work on this size or either A5, but I've read people complain that there's only A4 and A5 available. A lot of people like to work on A3 for sketchbooks, and they're not available. Like, they don't have any more sizes available. I believe there's only A4 and A5. But overall, to finish this review, I'm really happy with everything. I loved the cold press sketchbook more than I was expecting to. I just really liked working with it. All the paintings that I did on it seemed to turn out really well, and I don't know if it's because of that or because I felt really comfortable working with this paper. And I'm also pretty happy with the watercolors and the pigmentation. Would I recommend these supplies? Yes, completely. If you're a complete beginner and you're not thinking of spending this much, yes, this might be on the expensive side. If you're someone that wants a little upgrade, then these supplies are really worth the price. At the end of this video, you're gonna see the finished painting on the hot press paper, which is not the perfect sketchbook, is the other one, and then you'll see an image of the first painting I did on the cold press perfect sketchbook. And if you want to take a look at more paintings that I did with these sketchbooks, you can see them on my Instagram. I'll leave a handle down below and on the screen. So that was all for this video. I hope you liked it. Please stay tuned if you're looking forward to watch me review the courses on the etchrlab platform. So if you want to see that, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when that goes out, which should be the next one. But I will already leave a code down below if you want to try any of their courses, because with that link you can try one workshop for free. I hope this was useful if you're looking into etchrlab supplies, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!